Hey guys, what's up? It's Joe Raiti from Raiti's Rides, and I have a little hot hatch here for you. I don't know if you know much about these cars, but this is a 2009 Mazda Speed 3. Now, before we get into the car, let me give you a little history about Mazda. A lot of people associate Miatas with Mazda. They've produced so many of them. Actually, it's the top selling sports car in the world, believe it or not, is the Mazda Miata. But Mazda has a lot of history with a lot of other cars that they've produced. If you're not aware of this, I think really what put Mazda on the map were their rotary engines in the 70s, into the 80s, and definitely the 90s. If you were a teenager like myself in the 1990s, you would have remembered the Mazda RX-7. That is a legendary car that still people drool over to this day. Very hard to find in stock original configuration, but it's that rotary engine that really put Mazda on the map. And guess what? They are heavy into racing what they build. In 1991, Mazda was the first ever Japanese car company not only to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but also to do it with a rotary engine. Fast forward a few years, eventually the rotary engine died out with the Mazda RX-8, and now all their primarily focuses on their inline engines, especially what we have today. In this 2009 Mazda Speed 3, it features an inline four-cylinder turbocharged engine that puts out 263 horsepower. Yes, you heard that right. Even though this car is almost 10 years old, we are looking at horsepower numbers very, very close to what's being put out today in the year 2018. So let's go ahead and check out the front of this car. As you can see, finished in this, I'm telling you, this wonderful, beautiful white, you can see that there's these air scoops. These air scoops are there because guess what? This car is intercooled. Now you're probably wondering, where is the intercooler? It's not a front mount intercooler. This intercooler for the turbo is actually mounted on top of the engine, just like a Subaru WRX or a Subaru WRX STI. What's ingenious is that Mazda was able to put those vents in there to ram air right into that intercooler, because remember, a turbocharger is going to produce a lot of extra heat. We need to cool that charge of air, and by cooling the air, you have denser air. Denser air is going to give you more horsepower, and that's why this thing produces 263 horsepower. I really like these first generation Mazda Speed 3s. Now, if you're wondering, what does that mean, first generation? These came onto the scene back in 2007. First generation goes from 2007 to 2009, and then in 2011 is when they came out with the second generation. Now, unfortunately, Mazda stopped making a Mazda Speed 3, and there still is a lot of talk that in the next coming years, they're supposed to be bringing it back. If you want to know a little history about the whole Mazda Speed program, it actually started with their proteges, which is a vehicle that was produced before the Mazda 3. So Mazda has a lot of engineering, a lot of experience with putting turbochargers on these inline four engines and getting a ton of horsepower. What I really like about the front of the car is I love the clean lines of it. I love this lower grille area, the fog lights. It really just gives it a nice, clean look. If you look at it like a 2011 Mazda Speed 3, they changed the front of the car. It kind of looks a little cartoonish for me. And what's interesting is that this original Mazda Speed 3, the first generation, is actually a little quicker than the second generation, and it's mostly because that second generation got a little bit heavier. But you really could see the Mazda lineage in the front of this car. Let's go ahead and take a look at the side of the car. Another thing that I like about this Mazda Speed 3, even though it's a 2009, are these wheels. Check this out. These are 18-inch aluminum wheels that came from the factory. I really think that it fills in the wheel well, very well, and it also just gives it a nice stance. So you can see that Mazda was really thinking performance, because remember, with a larger diameter wheel, when I say 18-inch, we're talking about diameter. We're talking about the width of the wheel. Larger diameter, you could run a lower profile tire. That's actually going to increase the steering in this car. And you'd be surprised, on a nice twisty road or a nice autocross track or a road course, this thing is going to handle like you wouldn't believe, even though it's a front wheel drive car. If we follow down the rest of the side of the car, I really like the lower sills that they put down here to give it that, muscle look to it. It gives it a nice muscular look, and the lines are very clean. One big thing, the biggest thing that's going to make this stand out, besides the 18-inch wheels, are going to be this spoiler. This is a Mazda Speed 3 specific spoiler. If you see a normal 3 Series, it will have a lower deck spoiler here. With this, you can see that there's nice airflow. This is actually functional. It's not just all show and no go. This actually produces downforce on the back of the car. Swing around to the back. This is my favorite part of a Mazda Speed 3. I really like how the shape of the tailgate is. You know, I think these taillight lenses became overdone for a while, but Mazda was really one of the first that were using those cleared out housings with the individual lights inside. I like that look. There's your Mazda Speed logo. When you see that, you might want to be careful if you're going to pull up next to it, because I'm telling you, if it's stock, 263 horsepower. If it's not stock, I've seen guys over 330 horsepower out of these inline four turbocharged engines. And then to finish it off, I love this lower valance here. I like the diffuser, the single exhaust outlet on the back. Now, since we're on the topic of the exhaust, this car features a Cobb, which that's a aftermarket company, a Cobb turbo back exhaust. Now, if you're wondering, well, what does that mean? Because this car is turbocharged, there is piping that comes off the turbo to the back of the car. When you do a turbo back exhaust, you're changing out that stock pipe all the way from the turbo to the back of the car. You do have some options. This owner decided to do turbo back, full turbo back, without the cats. And when I say cats, no, I'm not talking about a pussy cat. I'm talking about those catalytic converters that starve us of horsepower. So it's a nice straight pipe all the way to the back. There are other options you could go. You could do a cat back exhaust, which would actually bolt to the back of the catalytic converter further up to the front of the car. You could do an axle back exhaust, which is based off the rear axles. It's all up to what type of sound do you want, what type of performance, what do you want in the end. But if you're ready, I'm ready to look underneath the hood of this little hot hatch and show you this turbocharged 4-cylinder putting out over 263 horsepower. Let's go ahead and check it out. All right, guys, check it out. We're underneath the hood of this Mazda Speed 3. Like I was telling you earlier, most people always assume that Subaru was the only company running a top mount intercooler. But guess what? Mazda figured out a way to do it, even though they are using an inline four instead of a flat four engine. The reason why they decided to go this route is, to be honest with you, the front of the car, there just wasn't enough room to put a large enough intercooler. So that's why they decided to build this special hood and put it right here on top. But you can see this is a 2.3 liter Mazda Speed Turbo. This is the intercooler. The air is going to come in through those scoops and go right down into that intercooler, and it's going to help cool that whole air going into the engine. Because remember, hot air is going to rob us of horsepower. One other thing I want to point out is that this car also features, the owner put a Cobb cold air intake on it. Now, if you're wondering what is the purpose of a cold air intake, it's all about, like I keep saying, getting cooler air. The way that they have it set up stock, it's in a box. There's a lot of hot air from underneath the hood that's actually interfering. That's going to open it up and allow cooler air to get into that engine so that you could produce as much horsepower as you can. But if you're ready, I'm ready to check out the interior of this Mazda Speed 3. Let's check it out. All right, guys, here we are inside this 2009 Mazda Speed 3. Now, I think this is where you're probably going to see the biggest difference between something newer and this particular car, just because we've come a long way with the interior materials and whatnot. But to be honest with you, like I said, this car is almost 10 years old, but when you look around it, it doesn't feel that way, to be totally honest. So when you look at the setup in here, I really like how clean the dash is. we've gotten to the point with these big, huge infotainment systems and screens and everything else. Very clean. I like the gloss black piano finish. If you look, I do like the steering wheel. Now, the one thing I could probably say to Mazda to improve on the steering wheel is give it some extra material at the 10 and 2 hand grips, because this is a standard Mazda 3 steering wheel, but they do put some nice red stitching on it. I like the gauges. I think another thing that I would like to see, which I've seen on other Mazdas, take that tachometer, which it's really cool. It says Mazdaspeed 3 on it. Take the tachometer and actually put it in the center. That way, you can, be front and center with how many RPMs you're turning. One thing I think is my favorite are these seats. I really like the material. I like the way they have embroidered Mazdaspeed. They have enough to hold you in, but it's not too much to where you don't feel comfortable. And I think that's always the biggest balance that we try to find in our performance cars is we want to have a quote unquote race car on the road, but we also want to be able to drive it every day. And that's what's awesome about this car is a car like this, you could drive and enjoy every day. Now, the biggest thing that I love, if you know me, I'm all about saving the manual transmission. This car, you have to know how to drive a standard transmission. And this has a nice 6-speed transmission. The throws are pretty short. You could get a short throw shifter kit for this car and even make them shorter if that's something you want to do. But what's nice is it's very smooth and you could tell exactly where each gear is in the gearbox. But I like it because what I feel is it's a whole complete package. That's what I feel like when I'm in this car, is that it has just enough to where you feel like you're driving something special, but it's not going overboard. But if you're ready, I'm ready to take this hot hatch out onto the road. Let's go do it. All right, guys, here we are inside the Mazdaspeed 3. I'm about to take it for a little spin. This is my first time driving a Speed 3, and I'm telling you, right off the bat, the clutch is so easy to modulate. The shifter is so smooth. And boy, when you want it to go, it goes. I love the blow-off valve. It's actually really, really, really nice setup in this Mazda. And that's the thing I was telling you about. Mazda, with their engineering and all that from racing, they're taking that experience and they're putting it into their cars. The thing I love right off the bat is the clutch. The clutch is so light and smooth. The shifts, it's very, very good setup. And the steering has a nice feel to it. This does have still hydraulic power steering. That does give it a nice feel to it. As we pull on the road here, now first and second gear are reduced in turbo boost, but when you get it on it in third, I mean the car just pulls all the way to red line. But it's nice and stable. But what I was saying is that this car, being front wheel drive with 263 horsepower, I think your biggest enemy is going to be that torque steer. Mazda did something to try to fight that. What they do is that in first and second gear, they cut the boost. By cutting down the boost, that's going to allow you to get the power to the ground. Then once you get into that second to third, that's when it's going to come on full hit. And I'm going to show you right here as we turn onto this road how that is. So I'm going to put it down in a second. I'm going to roll into it. It just pulls. I mean, the sound, the way that the owner has the turbo back exhaust with the blow off valve, it sounds really, really nice. Like I said, I think my biggest gripes, if they could even be gripes, is I wish the steering wheel was a little bit larger, had a little bit extra grip. I would like that tachometer to be smack dab in the center, not because I'm staring at it, but just for me, especially being new to the car, to be able to glance down and see it front dead and center would probably be better for me. I know for a lot of other people. But other than that, like I said, this car is 10 years old and it drives good as new, probably better than new with the modifications that the owner put on it. And like I said, Mazda did a great job with trying to battle that dreaded torque steer by adjusting the turbo boost. But the sound coming from that exhaust back there, that's what I love, is the passion, the experience. You go and you drive a car that's dead quiet. It has no feel. It's like you're driving in an autonomous car. Something like this, it makes you know that you're driving something special. And when you see a Mazda Speed 3, that's that WRX STI. That's your Ford Focus RS. That's the high end of the performance with Mazda. All right, guys. So it's been one hell of an experience, and this is something that I personally love by having this YouTube channel is I get to experience some cars that I would have never guessed I'd be sitting behind the wheel. And this Mazda Speed 3 has been such a wonderful car to drive. I knew it was going to be good, but it had that extra something that really makes the car special. I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to CJ for bringing this beautiful 2009 Mazda Speed 3 out for me to review for you guys. If this is the stuff you like to see, the hot hatch, leave a comment in that comment section. You can visit ratiesrides.com, leave me a message through my website. Also, check out my Instagram page, Radies Rides, and I also have Twitter, Radies Rides as well. And if you have not hit that subscribe button, my question still is to you, why haven't you done it yet? I promise you it's worth subscribing. Hit that bell so you get the alerts. I'm always coming out with new videos each and every day, from my vlogs to my in-depth car reviews. And just like always, guys, I'll see you on the next ride.